Here we go.
Parte Del Piero, rete Del Piero.
Pallone con i contadini per Nedved,
Pirlo, la conclusione in rete. Andrea Pirlo, un gol pazzesco.
Del Piero, gol! Alex Del Piero!
Sulla compagna di Pogacar, Pogba, rete, un gol incredibile. Pogba fa esplodere lo Juventus Stadium.
Ciao tifosi bianconeri, hello and welcome to episode 280 of the Turin Giants podcast. I'm Kevin, stepping in as your temporary host today, and I'm joined here by Zach. Zach, how are you?
A very good morning, Kevin. I'm well.
I can hear the morning sleepiness in your voice.
Yeah.
For those who watched this game in the U.S. Or in other kind of west time zones west of Italy, this was an early start. So it was. We were hoping that we would have something to be happy about to start our Sunday, and that's exactly why we're here. And we must admit, we're coming to you a bit spontaneously and unplanned. Because of a lot of family obligations and some traveling across our podcast crew. We actually didn't have a recording scheduled for today, but right after the Empoli match, Zach and I were messaging. It's, hey, we've got a few minutes here to record something so we can at least get something out to our audience. So we're happy to be here, and apologies if we're a bit unstructured compared to normal, but we're happy to spend this time with you guys.
Unstructured is our structure, though, Kevin.
I think that's
we're good to go.
Yeah, that's fair. So this will be probably a quick one, but definitely a lot to talk about. We didn't have an opportunity to go through the Benfica match, so we will talk a little bit about that. There's been some movement in the transfer market as well as the winter transfer market wraps up, and then of course we had a kind of sigh of relief getting back to some winning ways against a not a very strong Empoli side, but the win is a win and we'll take it and move on. So with that, we'll let the man who we did not see that goal coming from today, but what a cracker from Dusan, and we'll let him kick us off.
Buongiorno, 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 buongiorno. Come ha detto lei, buongiorno, buongiorno.
So Zach, Benfica match earlier this week. It was our final match of the. Are we calling it the table stage, the group stage? What's the official terminology for these opening round of matches?
I have no clue. I guess phase one, right? And
Phase one.
There's a term out there, but early morning, still drinking my coffee version of me is not recalling it. But it was our final game. It was going to determine where we sat in that table and ultimately determine or kind of determine who our next opponent was because they have this weird draw stage, right?
Yep.
And it also came on the back of, we talked about it, a series of, really bad performances, and we were hoping for maybe finishing out that phase one on a different type of tone than maybe we had seen for the majority of the month of January.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we were looking to end end that this phase on a positive note, particularly on the back of the horrendous second half against Napoli. We saw Angel Di Maria's return to the Allianz. We won't spend too much time on this. I think we want to spend the majority of our focus on the Empoli match, which we're kind of fresh off of watching. But why don't you kind of share a few thoughts from Benfica?
So the first thing I'll say is we have another injury in defense, right? Kalulu, it looked like, they use the really long technical medical terms, so you'll need a doctor, but it looked like his hammy And of course, he drops out of the match really early, the 12th minute or so, which leaves our back line like the setup for a bad joke. Like what does a midfielder, a center back, a winger, and another midfielder have in common? Well, that's our back line, which is just horrendous and almost comical to watch. Even with that, you maybe you try to look for ways out of it. Say we're going to build up. 67% possession led to an expected goals of less than 1. Yeah, I think that just shows you that we offered very little moving forward. Benfica was way more clinical, was way more purposeful, and the string of bad performances extended by 2 more halves after that game. And I think the community reaction was rightfully quite upset, because you want a response from the players, you want a response from the team when you do show a series of bad performances. And my call to the team in the last episode was to make sure that our back-to-back performances, the Brugge game and the Napoli second half and stuff, wasn't going to become a trend. And after Benfica, I was really nervous that we were stepping into a trend of bad form.
Were there any positives that you took away from that game whatsoever?
No, there was no positives. The team was sloppy. The team had a lot of errors. The tactical setup I thought was poor. Putting Yildiz, who's going to play more advanced in the 10 role, and then Douglas Luiz, who's going to play deeper in the back, created an enormous amount of space in the midfield that Benfica just ate up. Any potential attack was absolutely neutered by Florentino Luiz. Excuse me. This dude was everywhere. Very impressive performance from him as sort of their holding midfielder role. The spells of good play were very small and with a lot of time between. I mean, there was an almost goal from Mbangula header on the far post at the 2nd minute. There was a shot on goal in like the 58th minute. There was the almost own goal from Otamendi in the 75th minute. These passages of play were just relatively benign and amongst themselves, but since there was nothing going for us the whole game, that was all we had to put our hat on. It's just 17 shots, 1 on goal. It just for a lot of folks on the podcast and a lot of fans and across the various communities that are discussing these games will have often said that we have possession that amounts to nothing. And at times I've disagreed with them, and where I feel like we've had chances that we just don't convert them. Well, against Benfica, it was absolutely possession that amounted to nothing. And so, I wanted to take a proverbial or metaphorical shower after that one and wash the filth of just have a terrible performance. And then hopefully the team would rebound against Empoli. Which at least in the second half proved to be the case.
Yeah, and I think Malta certainly agrees with that assessment. After the match against Benfica, quotes throughout the entire match, we certainly didn't deserve to win. They played better than us, especially in the first half. In the second half, we opened up a bit, but now reset, focus on preparing the next match against Empoli, which fast forward, we know that proved to be a better outcome. But I think to kind of close the page on this opening phase of the Champions League, back in the Champions League after a year out, kind of my personal reflection on it saw really kind of a spectrum of performances. Some of our best matches that we've played so far, and what I think is fair to say has been a pretty mediocre and average and underwhelming season, but also some of our worst performances. I think kind of very, very few just professional go out and win and beat a team that you're supposed to, but it's been like really electric performances against PSV, against Manchester City, against Leipzig, and then we see these matches against Stuttgart, against Club Brugge, against Benfica, which were just dreadful. I think it shows the inexperience of both our coach and the squad in this competition, where it is definitely going to be different from Serie A. it's encouraging that we have the ability to deliver some nice performances, but it's these bad performances coming out flat, getting a slow start, inability to do anything with possession and having sterile possession, which we know has been a consistent kind of theme throughout many of our subpar matches. And now, obviously, going into the knockout phase, the stakes are higher. It's interesting that we come up against the PSV side again, but was definitely hoping for something a bit better. But over the course of those 8 matches, but maybe that kind of hope was a bit misplaced given the reality of the team, the squad, and our leadership.
Yeah, injuries and so forth. Like, it's not a surprise that your positive performances were earlier in the year, like with Bremer, and then your poor performances were more recently, where we had a much more patchwork team. But it brings us, and you mentioned, I guess we'll talk it just super quickly. You know, our first knockout round is against PSV, which is a rematch from our first Champions League match way back when. Obviously we won in the first match 3-1. It was a really good performance from Juventus. Despite willingly ceding possession at home to PSV, we were very clinical on the counter, and it was a really good team performance. I know they have some injuries as well. And so I think in 9 days' time, when this sort of home and away series kicks off, we have the opportunity, certainly relative to some of the other picks that were floated over the course of this last week, to get through the next round, where a match, with Inter might be waiting for us, which would be a real tantalizing tie.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see how that unfolds. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. One game at a time. So we've got PSV, the first fixture coming up the week of the 10th, and then I think the following week is the return leg.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
I think the 11th and the 18th, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. Are
Okay.
the match
All
days.
right. Well, we'll certainly have you covered once we get there. So we'll kind of close the page on this portion of the Champions League, and onwards we go. We made it to the knockout round, which will be great for club finances, and maybe we'll be able to kind of rebound a bit as a team. But personally, I my hopes are too high right now. But look, the management, before we get into Empoli, has been Giuntoli specifically working to bolster the squad for what could be a very challenging second half of the season. Again, moving into knockout phases of the Champions League, looking at going into the later stages of the Coppa Italia and trying to salvage a top 4 position in Serie A. We all know that we've successfully brought in Colomwani, who has now scored 3 goals in the last 2 Serie A matches. We've brought in Vega from Chelsea. Zach, keep me honest, the Portuguese fullback name escaping me right now. Yes, we haven't seen him. He hasn't. We haven't seen him play yet. We saw Vega today against Empoli. I think a professional match, didn't have a whole lot to deal with. Also on the transfer front, looks like we lost out Donza, who's chosen to go to Tottenham over Juve. Interesting choice. That club seems to be in a bit of free fall right now.
It's Donzo, not Donza.
Donzo. I flipped it. My apologies. Also bringing in, it looks like we're very close to bringing in another defender from Newcastle, Kelly. I don't know much about this player, so admittedly, I'm curious to learn more about this individual. I know he hasn't, from the brief amount that I've read, he hasn't been super impressive, or hasn't had a lot of game time, and actually has a pretty meaningful kind of injury history. So I'm curious if he's going to see more of the pitch or J Medical. Anything to add on Kelly, Zach?
No, I'm in the same boat as you. If I'm not mistaken, he was a recent signee for Newcastle who just hasn't been able to get on the pitch. And, I don't know if it was from what we're hearing, if it's a loan with obligation for upwards of 20, it kind of strikes me as a potential, like panic buy type of situation where once Kalulu goes down, you need a body in there more than just Gatti and Vega. So we'll see. I don't want to knock the kid before I know too much about him, but I've heard everything that you've heard, and an obligation, if that is the case, upwards of 20 for a guy who hasn't played. When you compare it to a deal like say Cabal, who was playing that second half of last year in Syria, and for maybe half the price, it seems like we're maybe panicking just on the financial front, not necessarily speaking about his footballing qualities.
Yeah, and I'm like you, I have no intent of criticizing the player, especially someone who I'm not all that familiar with, but I'm more just critical of the club situation in which we put this squad together to compete on multiple fronts. We knew we were thin in center back, and if the squad or if Malta and Giuntoli from the beginning of the season had doubts about Danilo, and we're not going to rehash that situation here, and I think a lot of our listeners and audience know how we kind of collectively feel about how Danilo was treated and how his Juve career came to an end. But if we knew he was on his way out and we got rid of Poison, we moved on from Rugani, not for meaningful amount of money, and Rugani just actually still on a loan, and then we're going out and obligating ourselves to spend 15, 20 million euros on unknown players, potentially subpar players. Again, not trying to knock that guy personally, but we had players who have been dependable, understood what it means to be at Juve. It just more question marks around the construction of the squad, where we tried to find finances. And now once we end up seeing a season play out with injuries or gaps in the squad, we're going out looking at players that carry risk when we had more, I don't want to say guarantees, but we probably would have more confidence in maintaining a player like Hoyson or even Rugani.
Yeah, I mean, at minimum, Rugani knows the league. He's played at Serie A level for a long time, and you don't have to be a starter to be a good influence in the locker room, right? Pensoglio, the master cheerleader himself. He never plays, but he's really important to this team. I think Rugani, in retrospect, hindsight's 2020, right? But maybe that's a guy you have here just as a calming influence in the locker room on not a lot of money. That would have really probably benefited this team right now, as opposed to spending 20 mil, upwards of 20 mil on an unknown player.
Yep. And to round out transfer news, we also saw everyone's favorite expensive player who doesn't see any bit of the pitch. Artur Melo gets his contract extended. And just so you understand, that's not us rewarding him in any way, shape, or form. It actually makes a lot of sense to be able to secure him for a longer time, spread out those wages, and put ourselves in a position where potentially we're able to formally actually sell him and make something from it in the summer. So he goes out on loan to Girona, who Girona is not reliving the magic that they experienced last season in La Liga. Artur, I wish I could say wish you all the luck, but at this point, kind of good riddance. You've held on too long and should have moved on elsewhere to further your career. What a strange career this guy has had.
You don't stretch out. You don't stretch out your contract unless you know that nobody else is going to offer you anything close to that type of money. I think his agent realizes that he might be done, and so he's just trying to milk this last contract with Juventus as long as he can before he, maybe goes back to Brazil. It's just this Pjanic Artur accounting trade shenanigan is still, I can't believe it's still on our books. It's just,
we're still feeling it. Like just years and years later.
I mean, what is Pjanic, 80 with grandkids now? Like, it seems like it's been so long. I
mean, Artur I actually was excited about this move. I mean, he had a a brilliant kind of introduction to Barcelona. And then, I mean, clearly we know how this has ended, and we should not spend any more airtime on our tour.
Fair.
But there was some other transfer rumors coming out about Yildiz and Manchester City in the summer, looking to spend 80, 90 million. That one is a bit of a head scratcher. I mean, it is coming from Gazzetta dello Sport. Their journalism as of late has not been at the credible standards that maybe it once was. But as those rumors start to circulating, I think we all start to get a bit anxious because we don't understand the transfer policies and what we've been focused on. So I really hope there's no real kind of merit behind that, but time will tell. And I think it'll be a nerve-wracking summer for some of the few players that we'd want to hold on to build upon.
That depends on where we finish, Kevin. Is
if fair.
If we finish top 4, we'll have the money to bolster the squad and say, hey, look, we're going to round out this squad. We're stay here, be a part of this project, which might turn folks like Cambiasso or Yildiz off to some of these tantalizing offers. If we don't finish top 4, we might have no choice. And we don't need to talk about it now because ultimately the performance of the team the second half of the season will determine that. But I think that is the crux of it. We said it before. Not finishing top 4 will put us in a tough situation when it comes to potentially selling some of the guys that might be sacrilegious to even think about it this time.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I think with that we'll transition to the Empoli match. So one interesting storyline here that we can start with is a little bit of I don't know if feel good is the right way to describe it, but at least something interesting was the return of Mattia De Sciglio. As we know, he was kind of boxed out of the squad over the summer. There were a bunch of excuses shared around why he wasn't training. I think they made up some injuries or something, and he blatantly came out and said, no, I'm fine. I'm ready to go. He wasn't in Thiago Motta's plans for one reason or another. Moves off to Empoli, has not actually been playing a whole lot, makes his return to the starting 11 and scores within the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, look, we saw it earlier with Moise Kean when he came and scored against us. We saw it today with Mattia De Sciglio. And, you hate to see a player score against you, but I've never disliked Mattia De Sciglio. I've kind of just saw him for what he was, sort of a bench rotational player on our team for a long time. And if I take myself outside of the context of the game and our season and everything, I was happy for him, and he showed a lot of respect for the Juventus crowd, purposefully not celebrating, just like Moise Kean. And so, especially now that we won, it makes it a lot easier to say that I respect and appreciate his time with our club, and I respect and appreciate the respect that he's returned to the fans and what he showed today.
Yeah, and for those of you who have been listening to the Turn Giants podcast for a couple years, might know that I spent some time living in Turin, and I still have an apartment there, and two of my really good friends that live right off of Piazza San Carlo, which is one of the more beautiful piazzas and places in Turin. They lived in the same apartment building as Mattia De Sciglio, and they had a nice kind of casual personal relationship, and they'd greet each other in the hallway, and they knew his dog and his partner and I think his younger son. So they were personally sad to see him leave and how Juve management treated the player, and which seems to be a theme when we're moving people out, as evidenced by what we just saw with Danilo. But again, I know my friends were happy to see him. They sent a video from the stadium today to me saying, Mattia's back. He's playing today. And it was just kind of funny. Like 3 or 4 minutes later, he does score. And they messaged me later saying, and I don't think it was picked up so much on the TV broadcast, but actually after scoring and refusing to celebrate, he actually further went towards Curva Sud and almost apologized as if kind of recognizing the situation, and he didn't help his former fans. But that was good to see. And then I think from a Juventino fan perspective, I think just kind of a pit in our stomach. And it's just, are we just in a complete state of free fall? the penalty situation, which
Oh
thankfully
my
and
God.
rightfully was called back. I mean, if we had been
Oh
kind
man.
of 2-0 down just within the first kind of 15 minutes or so, it just what is happening. But look, we did turn it around. The second half of the first half, we were playing with a bit more conviction and intent, and just like so many games this season, it took almost half of a half to get moving, and then we know in the second half we turned it around. But Zach, anything? You just we jumped right into Mattia DeCilio, but just if you look at the beginning of this match, the lineup, thoughts going into it, kind of the overall approach that we needed to take. What's your initial perspective?
So we're still patchwork at the defense, right? We've got Weah playing right back, but we see the introduction of Vega, one of our loan signings, starting at defense. Hasn't been spent much time with the team, so I was curious to see how he would play. McKennie returns to the midfield, which is something I want to maybe talk a little bit about later. And then finally, Kolomwani starts over Dushan, which is another thing we've discussed is, after scoring against Napoli and looking effective in that game on the few touches he had, does Dushan get a game anymore? And that's definitely something that we're going to continue talking about today. I think early on, we, like you said, we started slow, so like we have for much of this season, at least certainly early on in the season. And I think a lot of it had to do with physical battle in the midfield, very physical, very aggressive. And if I can kind of touch on the McKennie situation, McKennie maybe getting too used to playing out wide because his touch was a little heavy and exposed us to some dangerous counter and some dangerous lost balls in the middle of the pitch.
Yeah, McKennie had an interesting game. I mean, the kid ran his tail off, and I to put in what looked like he was playing in more of the number 10 position. I think regardless of what you saw kind of show up on the television screen for the lineup we had, or looking at whatever your kind of favorite website of choices to see the lineup and stats. I mean, they showed Koop Miners in that 10 role, but I think it was pretty clear that Koop Miners was playing much deeper throughout this match next to Locatelli, and McKennie was much more advanced. But while you bring up McKennie, it is worth pausing just to recognize kind of the accomplishment or milestone that McKennie had this past week with Benfica. Again, we talked about that match, and it was a very poor match, but still being, I think, the first North American and certainly the first person from the U.S. to captain the Serie A side, even though it was in the Champions League, but that for Juve, which is interesting. I mean, we can all have our opinions on the kind of captain rotation and the way that Malta approaches that throughout this year. I think he was the 8th person to wear the armband from the first minute.
Yeah, there've been a lot of them.
Yeah, and just from obviously we have a very global, diverse audience here with the Turn Giants podcast, but selfishly being an American myself, it was kind of very interesting to see that, and gave me a little bit of pride. Yeah, so just my one comment there.
And I think I don't think many people would dispute the fact that he's probably one of our hardest workers whenever he's on the pitch, and his tactical versatility has been crucial for us this year as we go through this injury crisis. And so I don't want to take away from his performance in the season, and certainly getting the opportunity to be that first American captain for Juventus, which is awesome. When we talk about today's performance, I kind of want to just put it in a vacuum, right? Today was not his best day, but I think it's absolutely worth calling out his captaincy. And I think we Turn Giants released a reel earlier this year asking if he's the most underrated Juventus player. I think he's shown his contributions, and basically from what I've seen, I think he's deserved a spot in that captain rotation. Based on
which is a weird sentence to say, but
right, it really is. It felt strange coming out of my mouth.
But I mean, in this season where we've had these injuries and some challenges with maybe a tactical identity, and his just flexibility and ability to play anywhere on the pitch has helped us. And again, playing in kind of a number 10 role today was just interesting. High work rate, not a lot of impact, some misplaced passes in the final third. Um, but how about Coop today? How did you assess his performance playing a bit deeper?
Coop grew into the game. I think everyone struggled that first 20 minutes. It was Empoli, I think, was given the instruction of, hey, this is a team that's there for the taking. If you come out and play hard, they got the early goal, right place, right time from DeCilio, which is strange to say, but on a corner kick where everyone's looking into the sun. And so that largely worked out. They put people under a lot of pressure. McKennie, 60% passing accuracy. Locatelli, sub 80% passing accuracy. But Coop Miners, despite that early turbulence of our team, stayed composed with his passing, dropped is like super deep in order to help our build-up play during that time. And as we started growing in the match, you saw him moving further forward to take a little bit more control of the middle of the pitch. Certainly as McKennie was struggling to help orchestrate some of the play. And so I really liked his development throughout the game. I don't think he had the overall impact that we want him to have yet, but I think he definitely adapted to the scenario on the pitch well to affect our team positively.
Yeah, I mean, he had 90% pass accuracy, 5 shots on goal, 64 touches. I mean, these are numbers that when he's playing further up the field, he doesn't produce. And I think we've discussed a bit. He seems to be more comfortable, or at least offer more to the team when he's like running towards the goal from the midfield, as opposed to when he's been in this number 10-ish position. He's often has his back to goal and has not been as effective.
And that one shot that McKennie, just was in the wrong place at the wrong time, blocked. That was probably a goal. So I mean, I agree with you. He's getting in those positions. We need him to make that jump. We can no longer accept the narrative, oh, he's new to the team. He's still growing into our tactics like we used in September and October. We can't say like, oh, he's improving. See how he's getting better over the course of the, November, December, January. I think it's time now that we're in February that he starts taking over games. This is the player we bought, and we need to see it now. And today, despite what I just said, is he was not there yet, and I need him. We need him to make that jump.
Yeah, it was better, but still not what we want from him. But what we did want today was a better second half performance, and that's exactly what we got. So you actually look at our last Serie A match where we went in the lead against Napoli. We come out and just flat, unconvincing, lack of hunger. Whatever Conte said or fed to the team during halftime that had them come out the way that they did was very impressive, and hats off to Napoli. And granted, now that the table was turned in this situation where we were going into halftime behind and we needed to come out and really kind of take the game by the scruff of the neck. Now, granted, we're talking about Empoli here. We're not talking about a top of the table challenger for the title and top 4. But regardless where we find ourselves this season, this is a must-win match where you cannot drop points. What do you think Malta was telling the team at halftime?
I think the important message is to come out with energy and dictate the play. We saw in the first half, the first 20 minutes were bad, but we were the better team the second half of that first half, if you follow me. And I think don't lose your head, but come out with intensity and pin them back in. Do not give them life or the opportunities that they saw those first 20 minutes. And an Empoli team that has injuries, especially in the back line, was going to give you opportunities. And I think that's exactly how they approached it. We came out strong. They other than that really beautiful long distance effort that was going upper 90s that Di Gregorio saved,
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, I'll take a long effort from players any day because they're really
Yep.
low percentage shots. Like Empoli created nothing that second half, even before the red card. So they came out with the right intensity. They started winning that physical midfield battle that we were losing the first 20 minutes. And I think when that started happening, the game started to flow in our favor because we were then able to transition up to Yildiz and Nico, who I think both played their hearts out, and Kolomwani, who when he got on the ball was other than the time he tripped on it, really dangerous when he got on the ball. And it all came down to us finally starting to win those midfield battles that we were losing early on.
Yeah, and I think your assessment of how we came out with energy and really took command of the second half and didn't really suffer too many opposition chances. I still think that first kind of 5-10 minutes in the second half was not the energy I was expecting them to come out with, but especially once Colomboani scored, then the remaining kind of 30 minutes of that half was all Juve. So with that first goal, I brilliantly taken by Colomboani, shrugging off the defender without fouling him in that build up. Was nice to see that shot. I know I messaged our WhatsApp chat, would this goal stand? Because it seemed like this was a perfect opportunity for VAR to come in and go back to that midfield like scrap that happened in the buildup. And like as you guys know, we're coming to you like we're recording right after the game, so I haven't had a chance to go back and rewind and review it. But I believe it was like Coop Miners and McKenny, like somebody was on the ground and like kicking at the ball, and it looked scrappy. And I remember in the moment thinking something was going to get called before the ball did eventually break loose and Colomwani went on that run. But it was nice to see. Anything, Zach, to add to that goal before we get to the second one?
Well, I kind of want to take both in stride because,
Okay.
well, at least the finishes. So do the build up to the second one was fantastic. Walk us through that, and then I just kind of want to talk about the two finishes from Kolomwani when we get there.
Yeah, and so there was it started. Empoli had the ball at the back. I believe again, this is just going off of memory here and not watching a replay. Keeper passes it upfield. We win it in the back, and somehow it gets into midfield. And there's some nice little interplay, some nice 1-2s with Coop, with Yildiz, and then Yildiz ends up coming up with the ball and has this Zidane-like kind of step over on
Pirouette
ice with the ball. Yeah, just in artistry, in beauty, and laying that ball off to. Did it go directly to Weah from him, or was there somebody in between?
I don't know, but then it gets to Weah in, who beautifully pinched into that inside space, and has shown a proclivity to take those outside shots when he gets the space, which he did today, and then he puts it in, and then Colomani, much like against Napoli, was in the right place at the right time, has the wherewithal, and this is really hard, by the way. People who've played football will attest to this, but to get a ball screaming at you and redirect it, using your body to redirect it on goal like that is difficult, and he did a beautiful job to put it on goal. The keeper had no chance because he was shifted the other way. And when I look at sort of that type of deflection goal, kind of like a poacher's goal, and when you look at the first goal of him, running into the channel, shrugging off a defender, and then sliding it past the goalkeeper, those are the type of goals that I expected that we'd get from Dusan Vlahovic. And those are just the goals we haven't been getting from him. And so sitting at 2-0 where he scores against Napoli, scores 2 goals today, the age-old question now, well, not age-old, this January-old question of, does Dusan get a game again when we look at Colomwani's performances and what he's able to do in the few touches he has, became scaringly, relevant, at least in my mind, as I'm sitting in my bed at 5 o'clock in the morning.
And Colomwani has, I believe, 2 goals with PSG since the start of the season, and now 3 in his last 2 league matches with Juve. I know I was a little critical of his arrival, like nothing necessarily against Colomwani himself, but just where are we investing money into our team? And we've understood that this club has had a lack of leadership. There's a lack of identity. We want players with a bit more grinta and not necessarily seeming to fit that bill, especially a guy who's been kind of riding the bench and probably has some deflated confidence. So I was critical of the move on our part as a club on whether this was going to be the guy to help back up Duzan, where we have no real backup striker, because Arek Milic, who knows when he'll ever step foot on the field again. But hey, hats off to Colomwani. He's had a nice start. I hope this has been a breath of fresh air for him, and he's got some kind of wind in his sails to move forward and help make a difference for the team this year.
Yeah, I asked, I see you could even get a game for us. And well, I now have my answer. No, I got a question for you, Kevin.
Sure.
Who has more Serie A open play goals, Dusan or Colomwani?
Is this a genuine question, or do you know the answer? And
I know the answer. I know the answer.
Well, I mean, Colomwani has 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Duzan had what was that? That was his 8th today for Serie A. That was his 8th.
No, so I'm kind of teeing us up for the 3rd goal.
No, not 8th from open play, but 8th total.
Yeah, so
right?
he has 8. He has 8 total now. When we're sitting at 2-1 up today, Colomwani and Dusan were tied at 3 open play Serie A goals for the season. Obviously,
that's wild.
That is absolutely insane. Obviously, Dusan has scored in the Champions League, and scored several penalties. So his goal tally is much higher. But from an open play standpoint, that was just wild to me. But it wasn't the tie was not to stand, because I think Dusan saw Colomwani kind of do his thing. He gets on the field. You see Colomwani move out wide. Dusan now at center forward. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but I saw Dusan Vlahovic dribble 2 people and then slot it upper 90s with a knuckleball from the outside, from right outside the box. Were my eyes deceiving me?
It may have been some of like the morning kind of eye crud or tiredness kind of blocking the vision there potentially. But no, in fact, Zach, you were right. That is what you saw. And it's actually funny because I think I had messaged you and some other folks in our Turn Giants WhatsApp group. I was actually getting ready to yell at him because he gets that ball. He broke away from the players, which was great. And he did his part to create some space. But then he has 2, if not 3 teammates completely unmarked in the box. And the right thing to have done in that moment would be to play them in. You would not even need a perfect ball because of the amount of space. And as he was winding up to take it, I was expecting this to end up in like row Q somewhere and just start screaming at him. And to his credit, if you are taking that shot, you have to score it, because this team has had an inability to close off leads.
Yeah.
And if we're 2-1 up, the script was written for us to continue to go after this match, be unable to score, and have Empoli come up with a penalty or some scrappy counterattack or some deflection in the 88th minute and tie this thing 2-2. But to Duzan's credit, he did score that. But I guess it was in the 90th minute anyway. So at that point, it would have been pretty tight.
That's exactly when we would concede, right? I mean, you talked about you mentioned earlier it's just Empoli, and I agree with that. But we tied last time we played Empoli. In fact, we've tied how many times against teams at the bottom of the table, or teams that at least we should handily beat, with a professional outing. And I was right with you. I mean, you looked at the field, and there was a flat 4 in defense for Empoli, except 3 of those 4 players were Juventus players. And then you had Dusan with the ball. Now, on one hand, I agree. On the other hand, when I really think about it, in order for him to actually slot it into those players, the defender had a good angle, knowing that Dušan's heavily left-footed. He would have had to probably use his right foot to pass to any of those guys if he wasn't going to cross it. And if he was
all he
used
had
his
to
right
do
foot,
is cut it back with his left and just slot a nice pass on his right to any of those guys, and they're one-on-one with the
did you
keeper.
just
But
hear what you said, though? He would have had
yes,
to cut back and then make the pass. He could have tripped on the ball. His right right-footed pass could have ended in road
he
too.
used up all of his skill beating those players
So,
already.
no,
So,
I mean, I'm
yeah,
clowning
you're
on him
right.
a little bit. I'm clowning on a little bit
Yeah.
because I think, at least in the way I think of Dušan is when he does something right this season, I've very much felt it be the exception to the rule, as opposed to what a highly paid, highly touted forward should do at a team like Juventus. And today we saw Kolo Muani score 2 goals that we would have expected, from Dušan, that we just haven't seen all season. So when you see him get that ball, I was right there with you, like, oh my God, he's going to just spoil this opportunity. It's going to still be 2-1. They're going to come back and score a stupid equalizer, and we're going to lose 2-2, and then we're going to we have no choice but to complain about it on the podcast. But he does what we've needed him to do for his entire time at the club, and really did a good job with finishing that ball. Really well taken, really powerful strike, and so credit to him for that.
Yeah, screamer of a shot, right up there with his not the same style goal, but just in terms of beauty and nice play, right up there with his 2 Leipzig goals. So this is probably one of his top 3 goals of the season. That ball wasn't even moving. He just hit that. So that's like kind of a Pirlo strike where the ball just kind of floats and knuckles a bit. But then, hey, 2 minutes later, Empoli kind of belting the ball upfield. I think Vega kind of wins the 50-50. It gets to Thuram. Thuram plays this really nice forward ball, probably 40, 50-meter pass to in-stride Conceição, and just tucks it home nice for the 4-1 victory.
That is the best pass that Thuram has done all season.
We have been giving him credit for his growth, particularly kind of as we approach the end of 2024. He's proven to be probably the best partner for Locatelli in that double pivot. His ability to move forward, ball at his feet, winning 50-50 balls, good football IQ, but his forward passing has been some of his areas of critique, and that was nice.
I almost had to rewind and be like, was that Thuram who played that ball? Because you nailed it. His forward passing has been errant at times. It's been a bit more pragmatic because he occupies space with his dribbling, not with his passing, and then it ends up being usually a shorter pass, maybe to somebody making a run. That pass was beautiful from deep on the towards the near side touchline, all the way across the field to Conceição in stride, who had made absolutely no doubt of it. I mean, obviously Empoli was in like urgency mode. Everyone was forward, but that's what a professional top tier team does, is they get the lead. And look, goofy fourth minute corner kick goals happen, right? Like, within the context of our season and our last month, maybe a lot of us were panicking, but these things happen, right? Professional teams respond with composure and don't ever let go. And we've saw our team fail to do that so often. So it was nice to see us take advantage of those opportunities today, because we just haven't seen it all season. So beautiful pass from Thuram, beautiful finish from Conceição, but it was really satisfying to see us finally put the screws to a team for the first time in months.
Yeah, and it was great. And I don't want to kind of over rotate on the positive emotions for this, but it does feel nice to have a win against a team we are supposed to beat, score 4 goals, have a nice kind of second half comeback to show that we can, in fact, turn a result around, getting some goals from our new signing, Kolo Muani, a nice cracker from Dusan. So Anything else you want to add there? I mean, this actually is our kind of first match into the month of February after a very long January. I think if you kind of rewind a bit at the end of 2024, we were kind of recording a podcast, kind of to look ahead for what the month of January would be as kind of a really telling month for what this squad would have in store for itself and maybe the future of Thiago Motta. And I mean, the month of January, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 matches. We had 1 win against Milan. We had 3 draws and 3 losses. It was a brutal January. And I think I even made the statement that if we get through January with those kinds of results, this would be telling of a very, very difficult end to this season. But we're getting through that terrible month with qualifying for the next round of the Champions League. We're still in 4th as of now before Lazio plays their next match.
Cagliari tomorrow.
So it doesn't look like it's been kind of that definitive break, no break month. But if you look ahead, we just played our first month of February. February is a short month, but we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more games. We've got the 2 legs against PSV. We've got Como coming up this Friday, followed by Inter mid-month. We have Cagliari, a tricky away match as always, and then we face Empoli again to finish the month with the quarterfinal match against the Coppa Italia at home. So potentially we have the opportunity to advance or not advance in both the Champions League and Coppa Italia, and a tricky tie against Inter could really shape up where this season goes. I mean, I think we're going to know whether this season is a total failure or we're going to have a chance to do something with it this month.
When we said that about last month, I think the fortunate and hilarious thing is it seems like nobody in Serie A wants that 4th spot, because anybody and everybody who has a bite at the apple, Milan, Florence, Bologna, us, Lazio, we're all just shedding points right now. And so, I guess we're kind of just shifting the January narrative to February simply because nobody has stepped up, ourselves included, to say, this is mine. Which is great for us because we're also not performing well. And despite, competing in 3 competitions this month, I think you'd agree that at least in Serie A, there's winnable games there. Certainly should be winnable games there. So it's there for the taking.
But they're away, which is the tricky thing. I mean, Como and Cagliari are games we should absolutely be winning, but we're away.
Haven't we played better away this year? Like I seem to think like, Stuttgart home, Benfica home, our home performance.
Yeah, that is true.
Been kind of stale. I think, in fact, today might be our best home performance of the season. Because did we start both games away as well, the Como Verona games?
Yeah.
So
true.
Maybe, and that's weird to say, away fits our profile well. Who knows?
Yeah, but certainly a telling month with the knockout ties for PSV and against Empoli and the Coppa Italia and the big match against Inter in a couple weeks. Yeah, I mean, I think, Zach, we got through probably what we wanted to, and thanks, guys, for tuning in. It went a little bit longer than we thought, but hey, we had fun talking through what was a very entertaining match and a lot of stuff kind of going in and around the club with the transfer market and what's ahead of us. Thanks for your patience, given that we were not as prepared for this match, and I'm recording this without the typical kind of setup, so I hope the audio quality has been good enough for everyone here. Zach, any parting words?
Just want to reiterate that the players did not really celebrate when this game was over, and I'm kind of glad, because an Empoli game at home finishing 4-1 is what should happen. It should not be exceptional. It should not be something where any of us are jumping for joy. This is what a Juventus team should do and move on to the next. And so I'm hoping that that reaction of the players is a sign of their professional focus, so that we can seize February like we talked about. And that's what I'm going to be looking for the team to do.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Zach. It was an absolute pleasure to join, to spend some of my early Sunday morning with you in my parents' basement here. We'll be back to more of a regular setup, I'm sure, with some of our forthcoming episodes. But so if you've made it this far listening, please, we'd appreciate a 5-star rating wherever you are watching this. Or listening to it rather. We are not on camera, so this will not be going on YouTube. We've got Spotify, we've got Apple Podcast, we've got the Google version, whatever that is, as I think Farhad has said for the last 3 episodes, not knowing what that platform is. But thanks for spending this time with us, and fino alla fine, forza Juve.
I was good in the middle.